Hello everyone, this is Michael from Valor Recon here today with another Valorant news video. Today we have the launch of Valorant Episode 4 Act 2, and it's our first act without a character or a map, and instead a bunch of agent, map, and just interesting changes. So in this video we are going to be covering all of that. One of the biggest changes are the Icebox map changes, and there are a ton of pictures that they show. Instead of going over all those pictures, we are just going to be looking at the footage in the background where I just ran around the new Icebox and you can see all of the changes kind of in a game perspective, which can sometimes put it into perspective, which should just save some time rather than looking at a bunch of photos. So just pay attention to that as we talk about some other changes. So the first thing is that there are some general agent updates to any character that puts things on the ground. This isn't a huge deal, but it does make it easier for things to go where you're expecting. And this affects Omen more than anyone else because it means his TP should go where you're expecting more often. However, that's not the only way Omen was buffed. Omen is kind of crazy now. I am going to insert new clips in the middle of this Icebox changes, kind of showcasing the new characters. So Omen has his cooldown on his smokes reduced from 40 seconds to 30 seconds, which I believe was the original cooldown of his smokes before they increased it in the previous major overhaul update. The cost of his smoke, however, was increased to 150. Now you might think, oh my gosh, why are they nerfing him? Well, this kind of coincides with another buff that happens later, so I'll talk about that at that moment. And the projectile speed increase is increased from 2,800 to 6,400. So essentially, the speed at which the smoke projectile leaves Omen and goes to its position is now like a little bit less than 3 times faster. And when you see it in game, which you should be seeing it right now, that is crazy. It almost feels faster than Astra. And so I do believe Omen is going to start seeing significant pick rate, because that was one of his biggest issues, was that his smokes would take 30 years. And spoiler alert, Astra gets some pretty devastating nerfs. And so that's really awesome. Now, his teleportability also received some buffs, and the cost was actually decreased from 150 to 100. And so since he has 2 of those, that means in general, in order to have all of his abilities, they now cost 50 credits less, because you are spending 100 less on the teleports and 50 more on the smokes. And then the pre-teleport delayed is decreased from 1 second to 0.7. And so you can see here in the background me just teleporting around, and yeah, that is significantly shorter. It means you're less likely to get caught in the middle of a teleport, and yeah, that's pretty awesome. The last thing is that Paranoia, his blind, was forward offset so that players adjacent to Omen are not hit, and this is really great. Before, if you were standing next to Omen, you would get blinded if he shot it, which means you would often blind teammates. That should no longer happen. Alright, next, let's talk about Brimstone. They are affecting all of the controllers here. And so what they did is they reduced the time it takes for Brimstone smoke to come down from 2 seconds to 1. So it should come down twice as fast. And the radius in which he can deploy does go up by 500. So that's a pretty awesome buff. In addition, the smoke height is a little bit increased to match with other controllers. So if you do something that you normally would expect to work with something like Omen or Astra, Brimstone smoke should work the same now. And then the most interesting buff, I think the other ones are way more powerful, but now his stim beacon also applies a 15% speed boost. So not only do you fire faster, but you also run faster, much more similar to the Spike Rush stim beacon. However, there is something that was not in the change notes, but when I was messing around with him in a custom, I noticed there is also no longer a cooldown on the stim beacons. Before you would throw one, and then there would be a cooldown before you could throw the other one. And I don't know if I don't really play Brimstone, so maybe this was a bug, or maybe it got removed without me noticing in an earlier patch. But at this moment, you can throw down 2 stim beacons at the same time, which actually can be kind of useful if you are trying to boost your whole team, or if, for instance, you're trying to do the speed boost, you can use it to rotate a little bit faster. I believe this 15% speed boost does stack on top of Neon, so that's pretty awesome. Alright, so next, let's talk about Astra, who has received the biggest nerf I have seen in quite some time. So let's start with the mechanics of Astra. First off, her stars are being reduced from 5 to 4. So she's going to have less stars that she can use. In addition, when she retrieves a star, it now takes 25 seconds to be able to use it again instead of 14. Just so you know, when Astra first came out, I believe it was even less than 14. It was like 7. So, you know, from how she was released, she is now significantly slower. However, they did add something kind of nice. You can now pick up place stars during the buy phase instantly. So if you mess up what you're placing and then you're like, oh shoot, I wanted that somewhere else, they do let you take it back now. And then they also actually increased the star distance placement from 10,000 to 30,000, which I don't think matters in any of the maps we have now, but that does provide them a little bit of ability to, if in the future they do want to add big maps, or maybe in the range now you can place it on the other island. She's supposed to be global. They just have to have a number for it, I guess. Or they have a number, so if they ever do want to nerf it, she can. Next, let's talk about Gravity Well. So her suck is now going from a 25-second cooldown to a 45-second cooldown, which now means if you can bait out her suck, she now, not only does she can only do a max of 4 of them, her cooldown is one of the largest in the games. Its size is also decreased by about 50, going from 525 to 475, and it no longer affects people underneath it. So if you were to put the Gravity Well on Ascent Heaven, you know, on A, it would not affect people down in Hell. So that's kind of a big deal. Then the Nova Pulse, so her Concuss, was increased from 25 seconds to 45 seconds, same as her Gravity Well. And the same thing where it no longer affects people fully underneath, so it's not nearly as versatile. Then let's talk about her Smoke. The cooldown goes from 14 seconds to 25, which does kind of suck, because before the cooldown was the same as a Smoke, so you could keep something smoked for pretty much the whole round. And the cooldowns are now sequential instead of simultaneous, which is huge. It's much more like Omen's cooldowns. Whereas before, if you use 2 smokes, they would both start their recharge at about the same time, probably with about half a second in between because of the animation. Now, if you use both, after 25 seconds, you're getting 1 smoke back, not both. So that means, you know, the cooldowns, you can't recover. One doesn't start recovering until you have the other smoke. And then the nebula size is increased, so the smoke is a little bit bigger to 475, which you'll now notice Gravity Well, Concuss, and Smoke are all the same size, which is actually pretty great, because now in Astral form, there's only 1 ring you see, and that is the size for all util, which is really, really great. However, they did help her a little bit. While in Astral form, items that you really can't see in Astral form won't block where you're placing a star. Her targeting ring no longer disappears randomly. Her pings are no longer blocked by level geometry that Astra can't see. So if she pings something in Astral form, it's more accurate. And fixed issues where stars were placed slightly higher than Astra was targeting. So pretty awesome. Nice parts to Astra. But I also feel like she is now less valuable than Brimstone and Omen, which is cool. Astra has had her time in the sun, and I do think she still has that value, but I do believe her pick rate is going to plummet after this. However, Astra's not the only casualty. Also, I didn't include footage of that because that's all kind of just basic stuff, and it's hard to really see the difference, but they add up quickly, and cooldowns, you don't really need to see that the bar does that, but or that the little thing says 45 instead of 25. But Viper, however, we have some really interesting stuff here. It is a nerf. Fuel. So her fuel drain is now increased by 50% when both her wall and her smoke are active. So essentially, if you're activating both, it's going to drain very, very quickly. And Viper's fuel bar now turns red when she does not have enough fuel to activate her abilities, which is just a nice quality of life change. Then her wall, the cooldown after deactivating, is increased from 8 seconds from 6 seconds. So if you deactivate the wall, you do have to wait 8 seconds, which is a lot more time when you consider that's your like shields down moment. Then the cooldown timer now starts when her smoke starts, or her wall starts dissipating instead of when the deactivation telegraph plays. So it does start a little bit later. So not only is the cooldown longer, it'll be even longer than 8 seconds. Not by much, but just by a little. The deactivation delay is decreased from 1 to 0.8. So that should mean that the time between when you click the button and the smoke is gone is now 0.8 seconds, which is a nerf because that means that you're not getting free fuel as they deactivate essentially. And now both this and these, by the way, all of these changes apply to both her smoke and her screen. I'm not going to read it twice. Her screen, her smoke, and her wall. Now the little nodes normally have a green light on them. When they're on cooldown, they will have a yellow light so that you know that Viper can't activate them right now. And then adds a unique voice line that plays when her smoke is disabled by suppress. So I assume it'll be something like, "Oh, smoke's going down," so that your teammates know. And then they also nerfed her molly so that it goes from 6.5 seconds to 5.5 seconds. Another nerf that used to be 8 seconds. So I do believe that this is a less, I don't want to say less impactful update. I do think it is a big deal. I think she'll still be played, especially on places like Breeze, but I think she'll be less of a must pick, which I think is a really good direction for the controllers. It used to be Astra or Viper or both, and now I think there's going to be a little bit more of a choice there, which will be kind of cool. All right, so next we have the Yoru rework. I'm going to do a separate video with a bunch of like myth busting and testing it out, and that'll be a completely separate video. So we're just going to kind of talk about the basics here. Just so you know, the footage in the gameplay is not the new Yoru, it is the old Yoru. Either way, let's talk about his footsteps. The charges have been reduced from 2 to 1. It is now actually a decoy, and the decoy is a full copy of Yoru instead of just the footsteps. You can still right-click to place it down, and reactivating it makes the decoy run forward. However, when the decoy is shot, it will turn towards the enemy that shot it and flash them in a cone, so it's a one-sided flash. This will be full height, so it should activate things like Cypher tripwires. Again, we'll talk about all of that in that testing video, but that's going to be pretty awesome. And because it's full height, you may be able to pass yourself off as a decoy. Then, let's talk about Gate Crash. His teleport now has 2 chargers instead of 1. However, it no longer does itself on a cooldown, and instead you get a new copy or a new fake out every 2 kills. And it costs 200 credits for that ability, so if you want the second one, it is going to cost you 200 credits. Gate Crash can now be faked, so you can make it make the sound of teleporting without actually going anywhere by looking at it and pressing F. Even though he has 2 charges, they can't both be out at the same time, so you don't have to worry about like looking towards one and teleporting. The time it takes to teleport for the teleport beacon has decreased from 1.5 seconds to 0.5 seconds, and the teleport beacon's in-game audio while traveling has been reduced from 22.5 meters to 12.5, so almost half. So it'll be much less likely that an enemy actually sees it. The teleport beacon speed has been increased from 675 to 800, so it should get to where it's going faster. And upon activating a fake teleport, a puddle will be on the ground that kind of tells enemies, hey, that was a fake. Then his ult, the duration has increased from 8 to 10 seconds, so it actually has gone up in time. Yoru is no longer revealed to enemies if he gets close to them. However, the unequipped time is increased from 0.6 seconds to 1.2, so grabbing your weapon after your ult has been, the time on that has been increased. Yoru can now activate all of his abilities inside of his ultimate. Not sure how that's going to interact with footsteps, but we'll talk about that in the other video. Yoru's footsteps can now be heard, meaning him himself can be heard if you're within 15 meters of him. So it's not the full distance. Just for reference, 15 meters is less than the old in-game audio of his teleport beacon. And I think this is the biggest thing. People were worried that you're going to be able to hear him like normal footsteps, but no, you are not hearing him like normal footsteps. He's actually about the same, a little bit bigger than the size of his teleport's audio. Can you hear his footsteps? Which means it's harder to tell because footsteps are harder to locate than something you can visibly see. And it means if you keep your distance, you're still completely invisible and invincible. And there is a little bit of delay in between activating his ult and going invincible, so you can no longer just run with it out. Overall, really awesome. Again, I'm going to do a separate video covering all of this. The fact that the footsteps is a 15-meter thing, I think is the biggest reveal from the patch notes today, as we've kind of already known what these buffs are going to look like, and that's part of why I'm speeding through it. That is huge. That means he still has a lot of the same impacts that he had. All right. And so kind of the last big change outside of the Icebox changes that you saw at the beginning of the video is that Ascent, you can now pick up the B orb without jumping onto the box. Before you could like grab the B orb and like it would like make the noise, but you couldn't keep holding on to it. Now you can grab it without jumping onto the box, which means there's a little bit of more variety of where you have to stand, which means it's less likely that you can get wall banged through that. And that is it for the like big reveals. There are a couple bug fixes, and they are working on a new map selection thing in Latin America right now that may get rolled over to all servers, but essentially it adds a couple rules, which means you should play less of the same map over and over and over again. Either way, guys, I will see you in the next one, which will probably be that Yoru myth busting that'll kind of replace this week's data mining, because there wasn't a ton outside of a new skin set that looks and you can check those out online. I might do a video if I really find them interesting, but we'll see. I will see you in the next one. Bye.